welcome to this episode of Authentic Achievements, where it's my absolute delight to be joined by the fabulous Joe Templin, who is an author and a human Kaizen, which I just love and can't wait to start to get into a little bit more detail. So Joe, welcome.
Kim Adele, it's great to be back with you again.
Oh, absolutely. I so enjoyed our last chat on USA Global TV. I was like, we're going to have to continue it because we only scratched the surface and we didn't really get into what is a human Kaizen. I have to ask because I've been fascinated.
So Kaizen is the Japanese concept of continuous improvement. And in the 1970s, when Toyota first was coming to the US shores, there was the big three automotive, out of Detroit. And Toyota sucked, quite frankly. I mean, their cars had crappy quality, they were shoddy, they were considered low value. But Toyota had a mindset. And it wasn't just a mindset, it was actually a principle that spread across the entire organization of improvement. So anybody on the assembly line could stop the assembly line at any time if there was an issue, and they would come and they would repair it immediately, or they would improve it. And it had a little bit more of a dispersed management structure than the very hierarchical one that was typical in US companies. And so frontline workers could make suggestions to improve the process, the product, and all this. And what happened is it created these very short feedback loops where every single month, essentially, the cars were slightly better and slightly better and slightly better. And very quickly, they caught up with the US manufacturers and then surpassed them. And so by the time you got into the 1980s, they were absolutely dominating the market because their stuff was so good. And it was from this attitude and process and culture of continuous improvement. And so that became a really big management thing in the 90s, early 2000s, where everybody was trying to have continuous improvement. And we applied it within the business world. But why is it not being applied in our homes and to ourselves?
I love that because you're right. It became very big, didn't it, in the 80s? And I was in the corporate space, so I am a qualified lean practitioner. So they took us all through the lean process, which is the one you've so beautifully described. But we've only ever applied it to systems, to processes, to infrastructure, but not to people. And that's why I've been so fascinated, because it makes such sense, doesn't it? That ongoing feedback, those little moments that I think Tony Robbins calls it the 2 millimeter shift, isn't it? When it's going wrong, we think we're going to have to do a massive change, but the reality is that we probably just need to do a tiny little polish of what we're doing already.
And James Clear calls his book Atomic Habits because it is so tiny, some of the changes that you make, but if you compound them over time, which is the reason for the cool nonlinear growth curve on the front of the book, is it just a little bit better, just a little bit better, just a little bit better in some way. If you improve 1% for the week, not even the day, for the week, at the end of 2 years, you're almost 3 times as good.
Wow.
But people don't want to do the little continuous things.
Well, we want that. We want the quick win, don't we? We want the big
Everyone
rush.
wants the pill or the surgery, or wave the magic wand and all of a sudden the unicorns are showing up with cupcakes and bags of money.
Oh, don't ruin my dream, Joe. I keep thinking I'll go to sleep and I'll wake up like younger and richer, but no, it's true. We do have that. We have that want, don't we, to do the quick win, and yet the reality is our success comes in the things that we do continually. And if we can keep improving the things that we do continually, then that's where we get our exponential growth, isn't it?
Yes. And just look at it. For example, I went to my 15-year-old's high school, he's a freshman, orchestra concert a couple months ago. And I compare where they are now at 15 to where they were a couple of years ago when it sounded like they were torturing cats. And it's just because he practices for 15 to 20 minutes a day most days and has his lessons. But it's that compounding, whether you're trying to learn a language or a martial art or to build your communication skills or your relationships. I mean, everybody in the current, dating world and Tinder and all this stuff, swipe, swipe, swipe. Oh, they're perfect. Boom. And I'm going to have a perfect relationship. No, it takes time to build relationships. It takes time to build intimacy on something beyond just a physical level. And if you take the time to do it properly and really invest, and you have those difficult discussions that everybody wants to avoid, you can create something that is much better and sustainable and lasting. And if done right, you can make it so that is much more interesting and has multiple components to it. And this is whether it's a work relationship, a friendship, or a actual romantic relationship. But everybody just wants to swipe, swipe, swipe and make it easy.
Yeah, we have made the world like too instant in the gratification, haven't we? And I was doing a speech actually earlier this week and said, in my opinion, there's a 3-letter word that changes the world. And you can see me looking like, oh my God, 3 letters is amazing. And I was like, the word's just yet. When we start telling ourselves that we're not good at something, now my little girl will come home and she'll go, Mummy, I'm not very good at colouring. I'm like, you're not good at colouring yet.
Yes.
But look how good you were today versus last week, last month, last year.
And that's actually got some tremendous psychological impact, because it is taking the 80+% of the power of the brain, the subconscious, and putting it to work as to how to figure out how to solve that problem.
Yeah. And that's why for me it's the life-changing word. And I say to her every day, let's redo that sentence. Let's put in yet, because it's not that you're bad at this. It's that you're not good at it yet. It's that you've not learned it yet. But when we do that, it's kind of unlocking that subconscious. And I do.
And you're reprogramming her reticular activation system. So you're changing her software and the filter that she looks at the world through. And so that's going to carry over into all sorts of other arenas, not just coloring, but also tying her shoes and attempting math and doing sports and all these other things. And so that's giving her a very good basis for which she's going to build almost everything off of. So having that not yet attitude is important, and then learning that it's going to take work and being able to accept and actually love the grind to build something significant. I mean, there's an old Stoic saying that the person who has never had to work for something is unfulfilled. I mean, if we literally had the unicorn just showing up and giving you stuff, you'd turn into a spoiled princess, as opposed to being able to work and appreciate not just what you have, but the other people around you, and it humanizes you. I mean, the individual who spent 6-7 years in the minor leagues before making it to the big leagues and succeeding, they appreciate it much more than the person who's just unnaturally gifted and shows up on day one.
That's so true, because actually, I think as well, if you've sort of been handed everything on a plate, the bit that you don't value is yourself, because you don't know what part you brought to it, because you didn't bring anything to it. It just came to you.
Yeah, you didn't earn it.
That's it. Whereas we learn the most. I always think, I guess looking back at life, I now realize that everything is a lesson, a blessing, or both. So if in the moment I don't feel blessed, I look for the lesson because it's probably there. And then in the future, I look back and feel blessed that I was given the lesson, because it helped me become who I am. It helped me to know to say to my little girl, just add in the word yet. I wouldn't have known that if I'd not made so many mistakes in the 30 odd years prior, trying to navigate that for myself. So I think you've got to, you do get grateful, but only if you take the time to be grateful, isn't it? To take that moment and reflect. And instead of looking on where I'm going, look at where I am and where I've come from. Because that's where you get the motivation to keep going, isn't it? And I say to clients all the time,
I've always survived in the past. I've got a 100% track record of getting through bad days. I can keep going. I can get through this, whatever this happens to be.
Absolutely. But it's giving us that time, isn't it? Because I think sometimes we focus in the wrong space. And, as you so eloquently put, our subconscious brain has got 80+% of the power. And it's, I always say it's the happiest little helper you'll ever have, but it comes with one very significant flaw. it doesn't know whether or not it's helping or harming. So whatever you tell it, it thinks it's important. So if you tell it that you're rubbish at something, it will find you all the evidence that you're rubbish at something. If you tell it you want to be good at something, it will find all the opportunities to help you be good at it. So you've got to use the right language, haven't you? So it can actually be helping you, not actually supporting your self-sabotage.
And the average person has somewhere between 50 and 80,000 thoughts per day. And most of them, probably 60 to 70%, are somewhat routine. And most of them are also negative. So if we can change just a little bit of that thought process by setting up the environment a little bit better, or as you said, adding the word yet, these little things, those tiny changes are enough to change the direction of the battleship, essentially. And if you, all it takes is that little bit of improvement each day. It's negligible. It's, you know, essentially not even noticeable, but it is over time you can see it. I mean, the Grand Canyon took millions and millions of years to get carved on out, and you don't notice what the river is doing. But over time, it will cut through stone and it will be able to carve these tremendous things. That is the same way that our thought processes are. And we get stuck in these processes. So sometimes you got to swim out, but they can literally achieve things over an extended period of time that people are just dumbfounded by.
Yeah. Well, it is. I mean, you know for yourself, don't you, when you've been, you know, start off and you don't know how to do something, and then if you just keep at it because it's important to you or you're passionate about it, or you keep going, and then all of a sudden the impossible becomes possible. You know, I always say
it becomes normal,
isn't it? That impossible, the very word says I'm possible. You've just got to split it in a different space.
And if somebody else has done it before, you can probably do it. I'm not sure who said that, but if somebody else has been able to sit there and in poverty be able to write some of the greatest fantasy novels of the past 50 years, J.K. Rowling, you know what? Why can't I? Why,
Absolutely.
you know, she did it while on the dole. Why can't I, you know, sit there and write every single day for 15, 20 minutes? You know, I've seen people turn into spectacular martial artists over a 10, 15-year period. And how'd they do it? Well, they started by going to their first class. You know, I've seen people become, you know, guitar virtuosos. And how did they start? By picking up a guitar and sucking at the beginning. But they did it every single day and compounded over time, had that success. So it is the consistent effort is one of the most important components to having authentic achievements, because as Stephen King says, a professional shows up and writes every single day. So there's going to be days when you don't feel like doing it. I mean, yesterday morning, I did not want to get up and work out, but I did it. The one secret of success is having no goose eggs, showing up and doing the job even when you don't want to. And when you can do that, it builds your intestinal fortitude. It builds your character. It builds your moral strength so that when you want to not do other things down the road that are bigger and even more important, you still have the mindset of, I'm just going to do it. You show up and take care of it. And this is one of the things that as a parent, we were talking about, you know, sometimes we don't want to do it, but we do it because this little person is dependent upon us. So my friend who's a special needs parent, her son had severe form pediatric cancer. It's like, I have no choice in the matter. I just have to do it. And so when it comes to work-related things, she's like, I just do it. And she's incredibly successful at what she does because she just does it. So building these habits, these attitudes, these disciplines in some areas of our lives are things that we can then carry over into other things. And one of the things that you will see when you look at really high achievers is that they have these cross-functional capabilities like discipline, like creativity, like strong communication skills that help them in multiple arenas of their lives.
I love that. It's so true. It's in that consistency. And the other thing that you talked about slightly earlier was kind of almost the power of belief. You know, if somebody else has done it, then you can do it. I think that was proven, wasn't it, by Roger Bannatyne? Everyone thought that the 4-minute mile was impossible. And yet within a month of him actually successfully beating the 4-minute mile, I think there was something like 23 people went on to beat it within the first month, because the disbelief was now eliminated.
Like, oh.
Yeah.
And
so
you see high school kids doing it all the time now. And it's like, wow. So, you know, it used to be building $1 billion company, or, you know, writing a bestseller, or putting together a successful podcast. I mean, once there is a track record from it, what was incredibly unusual now becomes almost commonplace.
It's true. And I think for me, one of the biggest lessons I learned since becoming a mum was the power of belief. Because I look at it and see, you look at these little people, don't you? Amazing little people all the world over. And you think if you were to turn around tomorrow and say, when you wake up, you've got to learn how to walk or talk or run or jump or skip, we'd be overwhelmed. We'd all be overwhelmed. That's a terrifying thing. And yet at our most vulnerable, we learn to do it. So you start looking at, well, why is that? Why is it when you're so tiny that you've got the courage to be able to do that? And I think it comes down to, in my opinion, 3 things, but things that we could learn for our future, which is we want to fit in. If you can do it, I want to do it because I just want to be like you. I don't really know how to say no and mean it. You know, even a toddler tantrum runs out of steam eventually, even if at the time it doesn't feel like it's ever going to stop. But the third, and perhaps for me the most important, is I've yet to see a child learning to walk that doesn't have at least one person nearby going, come on, you've got this, you're so close. So we quite simply lend them our belief. We give them our belief and let them cling to it. And wouldn't it be an amazing thing if we did that as adults, if we shared our belief in other people, if we proactively, instead of just saying, can you do this job for me, say, can you do this job for me because I believe you've got the greatest skills for
I know you can do this.
Yes.
And there's one other component to that, is that, you know, kids all have a growth mindset. They're sponges, they explore, they want to learn, they don't understand the power of no, other than, you know, parents telling them, no, you can't do this. But, you know, they have no boundaries in terms of what they believe is possible. And so it's that combination of having this just unbridled belief and enthusiasm and optimism, but also having the big person being there supporting them, saying, you can do this, you got this. So that is the critical combination for success in almost anything. If somebody's trying to build a business, they have their own personal belief system that they can do this and they've got the vision. What they need is they need somebody on the outside, whether it is a best friend or a spouse or a mentor, saying, you got this, you can do this. You know, yeah, I understand it's a tough day. Yeah, you fell down your butt 10 times. Come on, get up, you can do this. And so having that almost cheerleader is one of the things that helps unlock the potential in a lot of ways. And so professionally, I do that with a bunch of my coaching clients. And I've actually had to go on out and assemble people around myself that remind me, yeah, you can do this, dude.
Yeah, it's true, isn't it? You know, we can do it for others, but we have to, you have to get people that can do that for you. You know, brain surgeons can't do their own brain surgery for a very good reason. We can't, we've got to operate on ourselves. So I think, you know, one of the things I'm very similar to you, you know, I surround myself with the right support, coaches and mentors as well, because I recognize I can't do it for myself. Because you find yourself, I don't know if you find yourself doing this as well, you'll be helping a client, you'll be giving them the advice, and in the back of my head I'm like, good advice, you've not taken it. That's because I'm giving it out, but I'm not doing it myself. And,
it's like, oh, maybe I should do that too.
Yeah. It's like, I know this works, why am I not doing it? But we all have those moments, don't we, where we're blind to our own blind spots. You know, they're blind spots for a reason. We can't see
there's
them.
an old Irish saying, a good friend is the best mirror there is. Or as Robin Williams said, a real friend will listen to your bullshit, tell you that it's bullshit, call you out on it, and then keep listening to you.
Yeah, it's true, isn't it? I always say one of my roles in life is to be the critical best friend. The person that's going to let you know your bum looks big in it before you leave the house, not when you've trotted around town thinking you look amazing.
A real friend will tell you that because they want the absolute best for you. I've got a friend who she's like, I just want people to like make it easy for me. I don't want any pushback. And I'm like, that's not a friend. That's an enabler. You're basically, you don't want criticism. You don't want somebody to challenge you and bring out your best. You want somebody to just make you feel good all the time. That is an addict mentality. You're just basically saying that you're drunk and you want somebody to always drive you to the bar and pay for your drinks, as opposed to saying, no, dude, don't do that. And this is one of the differences. And this comes about talking about excellence or achievement, because champions want to be coached and coached hard. People who don't want to be pushed that way aren't going to become the best version of themselves. And so they're going to have regret over time. They're going to pull other people down mentally and emotionally and potentially even physically and financially. But the people who say, show me my flaws, tell me why I can do better. I was having dinner with a friend the other night. I'm like, I'm screwing up. And, I think I'm screwing up like this and this. And she's like, well, actually, you're screwing up like this. And this is some of the things that you should do. And so a good friend, a good mentor is going to tell you that, not because they want to hurt you, but because they want to help you. But it's just like lifting the weight. And, it hurts lifting the heavier weight. You have to tear the muscles a little bit to grow bigger and stronger. It's like if you're Tiger Woods, who basically redid his golf swing to make it even better. So it's being able to go through that painful self-discovery, very often guided by somebody else who cares about you, and take a step back so that you can take multiple steps forward.
I love that. It's so true, isn't it? 'Cause if we think about most of the things that propel us forward, they have to come back first. They have to come, catapult. You've got to pull it back for it to be able to move forward. So I always try and remind myself of that analogy when I'm thinking about it. Sometimes I have to take that step back to be able to do that move forward, and to be able to be the best version of myself, because I think that's our yardstick in life. I always try every day to be a better me than yesterday, because if I can achieve that, then eventually I'll be a really good me, hopefully.
Yeah, and I say I'm a practicing Catholic. I'm practicing because I still don't have it right. I'm trying to get better, and it's a non-linear thing. It is not a straight line. I mean, there's some days where you step back and then eventually move forward. So it's not this nice, easy straight line. It's more like the flight of a butterfly, but gravitating towards success.
That is so true. And I guess it's being comfortable with that, isn't it? That actually, when it's not, we make mistakes. We're human. We're fallible. We're not perfect. We're not supposed to be perfect. But I don't think it's the mistake that defines us. It's what we do with the mistake. It's whether or not we acknowledge it, apologize and learn from it, or ignore it and hope it goes away, or deny it and pretend it didn't happen.
Well, it's like trauma too, because we all have traumas. We all have, major bad things that happen to us. And it's like, do we have post-traumatic stress from it and we get bunker mentality and negative from it? Or do we get, as Dombrowski says, post-traumatic growth, and we use it as fuel? Michael Jordan getting cut from his high school team, he used that as fuel to become great. In fact, when he was initiated to the Basketball Hall of Fame, he invited the guy he lost his spot on the high school team to it, because it was still a chip on his shoulder. Now, that's an extreme example, but we're probably not going to become Michael Jordan. But do you take the bad thing and let it harm you and hurt you and hold you back? Or are you going to take it and use it to force you to grow into something better than what you were?
I love that. It reminds me, I don't know whose quote it is, but it reminds me of the quote that when you get why me, swap it for try me. So actually, instead of being the victim of it, go, okay, bring it on. Let me see how far I can get. And I guess that's the thing. If we can find the thing that motivates us to keep going, to keep moving through, you know, and I think sometimes that can be inside of us and sometimes it can be outside of us. I know in some of my most traumatic experiences, like your friend, albeit, you know, my daughter doesn't have any illnesses. She was my greatest strength because she needed me. She was a baby. So it was like, I don't get to break down. I don't get to give up and go and crawl under a duvet and feel sorry for myself, because she's one. She needs feeding. She needs looking after.
Yeah.
She needs loving, nurturing. So actually just focusing on her helped me get through until all of a sudden you looked back and was like, oh, look, months have gone. I'm still here.
Yeah.
I'm still living.
You become strong because you have no other choice. And then after the fact, you realize how strong you were and became, and then you can take that and apply it in a new way. And so Malcolm Gladwell talks about this. He calls them desired difficulties. So you look at, like, the owner of the Mets, Steve Cohen, had dyslexia as a kid. He still has it. And so he had to learn a different way of learning and applying stuff. And that it gave him an advantage later on when he was building his career as a trader. So if you have a disadvantage that you have to work harder for, and you can turn it into a unique special capability. Another example that I use around that is Bruce Lee. Everybody loves Bruce Lee movies and they love, you know, all the cool kicks that he was doing and everything. Bruce Lee had one leg that was slightly shorter than the other one.
Really?
And so instead of this being a hindrance, he turned it into an advantage and became, because of the slight difference, he was naturally talented at spinning kicks. Cool. And with the thousands and tens of thousands of hours of practice, he became Bruce Lee. And that became one of his signature moves because of it. Tony Iommi from Black Sabbath. Tony Iommi lost the tips of his fingers in an industrial accident in the early 1970s. So he couldn't play the guitar the normal way. So what did he do? They tuned it down by like a half an octave to reduce the pressure. And that ended up creating that signature deep Black Sabbath sound. Okay, so these are examples of people taking what could be considered a catastrophe and completely turning it on its head.
I love that. One of the things I talk about is turning your vulnerability into your superpower, because very often our thing we're vulnerable about is the thing that makes us great. You know, I spent years worrying in corporate life that they would find out that I was an ex-hairdresser and I didn't have the degree or the qualifications or the right to my job. And yet I now realize that was my greatest gift of leadership, because as a hairdresser, they teach you to listen to what the person really wants, to help them to achieve it, and to let them leave feeling the best version of themselves. Well, that's leadership. That's kind of what we're here to do. So
you know what? The best internships in psychology and sales are hairdressing and bartending.
Yeah.
So you learn to listen, you learn to bring out the inner beauty in the other individual, which is ultimately what leadership is about. Leadership is about being the black velvet under the other people's diamonds and letting them shine. And so that's what a great hairdresser does. One of my closest friends is a hairdresser, and like, she doesn't have a lot to work with me, unfortunately. But I mean, we talk about how she can like see the transformations in people over a couple of times working with them, in terms of bringing out their personality, bringing out their bubbliness in some ways, you know, making them more confident. And if you can then continue to bring that to fruition in terms of what you do for work, what you're doing in terms of relationships, what you're doing in other arenas, that is exactly what we're trying to do from a leadership point of view, or me as an author in terms of my focus on bringing out people's excellence. It's all different ways of doing it. As they say, many roads lead to the mountaintop.
I love that. I loved the whole analogy about being the velvet underneath somebody else's diamond. What a beautifully eloquent way of putting it, because that is what leaders are there for, to hold others up and let them shine their light brightly. Joe, it's been an absolute delight. I could chat to you all day. Hopefully we get to do it again if you'd come back on.
I'm looking forward to that.
Which would be amazing. But in the interim, how can people get in touch with you to learn more about you and what you're doing?
So they can follow me on Twitter or Facebook. Those are both at EDE with Joe. So they can just DM me and interact with me there. Or if they go to the website, everyday-excellence.com. That's everyday-excellence.com. I put up new blog posts every day. These podcasts go on up there. There's Twitter feed, all these other things. And they can reach out to me directly through there.
Amazing. I will make sure all of the links to that are in the notes below for anybody that is listening or watching. I hope you found it as insightful as I did. Joe, it's been an absolute joy. Until next time, thank you.
Kim Adele, thank you. Be excellent and grow today.
And you, take care.